On behalf of the Joshua Tree National Park Association, the Desert Institute, and Copper Mountain College, I'd like to welcome all of you to the final of the 5 presentations that are part of the Black Rock Symposium. I think we saved the very best to last. The 4 folks you're going to be hearing tonight are some of my favorite people in the Morongo Basin. They do a spectacular job in helping out the National Park Service and all of us. I wanted to spend a special thank you, though, to Jeff Cummings this evening for letting us use this venue for the 5th time this year. It's great to have you as a partner. Thank you so very much. I also wanted to point out Don Rowe from Colonel Cook's office. It's great to have Congressman Cook's field representative here joining us as well, so thank you for joining us tonight. And it's great to see a lot of friends out there this evening. So, as most of you know, and I know just about everyone in this room, this is really neat. I love being here for 3 years. I know everyone now. I'm Dave Smith. I'm the Park Superintendent for Joshua Tree National Park, and it's an honor to serve all of you in that capacity. I love the national parks. I was sharing over dinner tonight with our friends over here that about, my goodness now, so I was about 21. So 29 years ago, John and I hopped into our F-250, we had a nice big truck, and we drove around the United States for about 3.5 months, and we camped every night. It was after we got out of college, so we actually had a degree, we just didn't have jobs. And had our dog, and we decided that the happiest people we met in the world were park rangers. And we decided to become park rangers during that trip. We picked up an application at Voyageurs National Park, and by the time we got down to Wapatki, we submitted that application and then got our first job at Dinosaur National Monument next year, back in 1992. So so I love national parks, and it's great to have partners that make all this possible. This has been a really challenging year at Joshua Tree. You probably have seen a lot of it in the press, and maybe a lot of you experienced. I couldn't help but notice Brian and Lori are back there. I'm surprised they were able to get out of their house this evening. Usually there's a train of cars preventing them from getting onto the park road. I love, so we go to church in Palm Springs at like 10 o'clock, and around 10:30 my phone starts buzzing with people that live in Monument Manor yelling at me because they can't get into their house and they want me to do something about the traffic going into Joshua Tree. It has been a really busy year at the park. We had 2.5 million visitors in 2016. Which means probably nothing to anybody. It's just a number in the air, unless you remember that for most of the park's history, we had about 1 million visitors. And this year, we're on target to actually top 3 million. This last April, so last month, I was just looking at the numbers. The year passed, we had 240,000 visitors in the park. This April, we had 360,000 visitors. I'm helping my daughter with math right now, so I can tell you that is a 50% increase in visitation in 1 year for that month. The previous month, March, was the busiest month in the history of the national park. 410,000 people came into the park that month. So pretty amazing numbers for Joshua Tree. So we have lots of challenges, and we rely heavily on our partners to make all these things work. In the history of the National Park Service, we got to remember partners have been there since the very beginning. The Northern Pacific Railroad was the reason why we actually had most of our national parks. You know, as they worked with Congress in designating new park sites, they made sure they were on rail routes so that they could develop hotels in those locations, and they could provide guided service in those locations. And as the railroads grew, the national parks grew across the United States. That's probably one of our oldest partners. I'd say one of our second oldest partners is the U.S. Army. Sorry for all the Marines that are in the audience right now, but the U.S. Army beat you to it. When our first parks were created, when Yellowstone and Yosemite and Sequoia, Kings Canyon were all created, we didn't really have a national park service. So we called to the U.S. military, specifically the cavalry, specifically the Buffalo Soldiers. So the men, the African-American men who had been designated to defend the settlers that were coming across the country in mid-century, in the 1800s, went on to become the very first park rangers that went on to manage those parks. In fact, probably didn't know this, but the very first superintendent of a national park was Colonel Charles Young, African-American graduate of West Point. He went on to become the very first. So today in the park we've got UC Berkeley, doing an incredible study of wildlife inside the park. They are recapping the 1916 Grinnell study that happened 100 years ago when they collected specimens throughout the park, and they're back in the park today doing that again. So partnerships have been part of our history since the very, very beginning, and they continue to be incredibly important today. So tonight we are joined by Dave Pylman. Oh, I thought maybe that was Danielle Segura, but please, guys, come on in. There's no problem. We're joined by Jim Ricker, Dave Pylman, and Meg Foley, and Danielle Segura will be with us in a moment. I'll read their bios as they come up, but first we're going to have Dave Pylman come up to bring you up to date on who Dave Pylman, in case you don't know who he is. Dave currently serves as the co-captain of the Joshua Tree Search and Rescue. You guys could cheer at the guys in the yellow shirts back there if you wanted to. It's all right. And is the outgoing executive director of the Friends of Joshua Tree. Dave is also the safety chair for the Southern California Mountaineer Association. Although he was born and raised in Pontiac, Michigan, and received his BA from Michigan State. He moved to Southern California in 1969 and stayed for 1 year of ski holiday in Aspen. Has been here ever since. An avid runner and marathoner, Dave took to climbing in 1991 and has stayed on the rock ever since. As an advocate for climbing, Dave has worked closely with Friends of Joshua Tree to host Climb Smart, the annual climbing convention that celebrates all things climbing at Joshua Tree, and also serves on numerous volunteer projects throughout the park. Dave was one of the founding members of JOSAR back in 1996. He spent many hours and many dollars over the next 2 decades learning about search and rescue in the wilderness and high-angle technical rescue through classes, seminars, and symposiums. This is translated to be one of the most highly trained search and rescue units that we have in the National Park Service, and we could not do it without the volunteers that actually make JOSAR. Dave has worked with Friends of Joshua Tree to organize fundraisers and help support JOSAR, as well as climbing advocacy programs inside the park. Friends of Joshua Tree is one of the primary sponsors of Climbers Coffee at Joshua Tree. Dave has heavily recruited to train locals about search and rescue and has done an outstanding job. And I would be remiss if I did not say that Dave's favorite person in the world is Vicki McConnell, his girlfriend. So without further ado, Dave Pylman.
Well, you said my speech, so I'm done. All right, hope this works. So back in the 90s, the early 90s, Joshua Tree National Monument was still a few years away from becoming a national park. But it was in 1991, under the leadership of Cindy Bradford, along with Bob Gaines, Mark Bowling, Brandy Vogel, and I know a few others, even Kevin, I think, was involved, that FOJT was organized as likely the first local climbers advocacy group in the country. The mission statement pretty much says it all, that we're dedicated to preserving the historical tradition of climbing in Joshua Tree, and that we advocate, communicate, and encourage ethical and environmentally safe, sound climbing practices, and that we act as the liaison between the climbing community and the National Park Service, specifically Joshua Tree. And coincidentally enough, that same year, the Access Fund was formed, and which was to address climbing on a national basis. Although there was a loose group of climbers here locally who had been working with the park on related climbing issues, the impetus to move to establish a formal advocacy group was a new proposed park project that would make Park Boulevard, or Route 12, through the park into a one-way street. And naturally, during this period, it was arguably the climbers that made up the largest user group. And so naturally, it would fit that they would want to be organized as an advocacy group and discuss this move. I mean, after all, those of you that are familiar with the road, you know that this would be over a 70-mile round trip from Joshua Tree. Even if you just wanted to go into the park as far as Intersection Rock for lunch and go back home, it just was a big burden on all the locals and certainly all the climbers. But the subsequent talk with the parks were successful and the project was suspended or scrapped. Shortly after this, the monument put into effect a wilderness ban on bolting, and FOJT was successful in negotiating a reversal of that policy. And then, 1995, I'm kind of doing this chronologically. In 1995, the monument lost its virginity.
David, I'm very sorry, David.
Oh, what's going on?
David, there's a problem here. We're supposed to take this woman to the hospital, but she said, oh my God, I have to come here first. We have to bring her here. Oh my God.
This was not staged, folks. This is real. What an entrance.
It's a little improv for you, David.
Yeah, it's great. Welcome. All right, so back in 1997, Friends of Joshua Tree, held our first climbers gathering, which we called Rock-In. Over the following years, that 2-day gathering has morphed into a 3-day, once-a-year event that we call Climb Smart. And this coming October will be our 21st Climbers Gathering. Climb Smart is our way of educating the climbing community to safe and environmentally sound climbing practices with climbing clinics, lectures, guest speakers. We also coordinate with the park. 2 days of park projects that have included in the past things like trash cleanup, watering projects for the transplants, social revegetation, revegetation of social trails, even some chalk cleanups, and over the years we've done a number of different things for the park projects. And of course it wouldn't be an event without food, drink, and a vendor village for all of our vendor sponsors to show their wares and their products and for them to get to know more about our local climbers. We became a partner with the park when we signed our first MOU in 2008 and a renewal MOA last year in 2016. We also became the official fundraising organization for JOSAR because of our 501c3 status and because of the park MOA, our partnership with the park. ClimbSmart now has now become the major fundraising event for us, and for more than a decade now, a major source of support for the JOSAR team. The team consists today of 54 volunteers and 12 park staff personnel. About 10 years ago, can't remove this, can I? About 10 years ago, we were donated a vehicle to be used specifically for search and rescue, and we had to keep it for 3 years before we could do anything with it. It was a nice car. And everybody wondered, how come we have so much money? But it was not a practical search and rescue vehicle. But boy, it sure handled the dirt roads around here nice. Oh. Well, we parlayed that into a more practical truck that would fit all of our gear, and we also donated that to the park. Then in 2010, we received a significantly large donation specifically for JOSAR, and we began the process of building a building, garage, office, cash, something for the JOSAR team, because we didn't have anything. The entire building, with a few minor exceptions, was built entirely by the JOSAR volunteers. And in 2012, we donated the building to the park. And we also sponsored a number of things over the years. Like Dave alluded to, we support Climbers Coffee. Matter of fact, Bernadette Regan, who's the climbing ranger in the park and who manages that event, told us last week that she served 8,000 cups of coffee this season. I don't know why she's keeping track, but works for the government, yeah. And we also contribute to HARP, the Hardware Anchor Replacement Project, Access Fund, American Alpine Club, the Outdoor Youth Ambassador Program, and over the years, a number of other things, all forgotten by now. So here we are in 2017. We've worked with 5 superintendents in our short history. And the climbing community has a really special, positive relationship with this park. And we certainly hope to continue that relationship and that we can continue to give back to our great park. Thanks.
More lights, please.
More lights, please. Kevin, please, could you work on that, Kevin? I'm busy up here. Thank you, Dave. That was awesome. Okay. Next up, I'd like to introduce Jim Ricker. Jim's the director, G5 Community Liaison for the Marine Air Ground Combat Center in 29 Palms. He's been in this post since February 2007. Prior to his current assignment, he was the Deputy Director for Operations. He's worked closely with both the Tactical Training Exercise Control Group aboard the base, as well as the units going through pre-deployment training. Jim's a retired Marine who served over 30 years on active duty. His last 9 years on active duty, he served as the Sergeant Major of various commands to include the 3rd Marine Brigade, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, as well as the Director of the SNCO Academy, Okinawa, Japan. His final assignment on active duty was as the Marine Air Ground Task Force Training Command, Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center Sergeant Major. His partnership with the Open Space Group to work with the Sonora Institute and create the report for the Morongo Basin priorities. He's also worked in partnership with MDLT to help acquire several properties for conservation, And I can talk from my own perspective. It's been great working with Jim in partnership with the National Park Service. Any given week, we have Marines training on some of our primary hiking trails, including the Boy Scout Trail, the 49 Palms Oasis, and going up to Ryan Mountain. We've done it in such a way that we train these young folks about stewardship of their natural environment as they are huffing and puffing through the park. So it's a joy to be able to introduce you and welcome.
Well, thank you for the nice introduction, David. Hopefully I don't screw this up because I don't want to get carted out like somebody had to get carted in. So when I was asked to come here and talk, they said, hey, we want you to come out and talk and a little bit about the partnerships that you have with the park. I said, sure, that'd be fine. Then I got in the car and I started thinking about it, and I'm going, where do we partner at? Aren't we all just neighbors helping neighbors out up here? Because that's how I kind of look at this, because we have partnerships with a lot of different entities. And as I stepped back and I started thinking about it over the last 10 years or so, it has been pretty amazing, some of the partnerships that we have developed with the park. And just to kind of list a few that are still going on today is the way that some administrative stuff that would bore you to tears, but it just helps two federal entities save your tax dollars, so that's a good thing. The other thing that probably that we see a lot of partnership with is through conservation measures. We're both very large federal land use entities. They don't want to have species isolation. We don't want to have species isolation. He's worried about night skies and dark skies, and so are we. In fact, we just did a study, I believe it was in February. He was out here. They did the study. We went about 15 miles into from the main side portion of the base, and it'll complement some of the other light studies that have been done up here for the dark skies, because that's important for our training mission as well, because of the night sky, using night training devices and that sort of stuff. And everybody's pretty familiar with what our base is and what our mission is. And just for those who are not, I'll just say real quickly, we pretty much do the graduate level of training for Marines and sailors that are going to be going into harm's way somewhere. They go back at their home station, and it's a building block of training. So when they get here, this type of training we cannot do anywhere else in the world than what we do right here in the Morongo Basin. And because of that, we are actively seeking out partners in different areas that helps protect the installation and its mission, as well as helps other units or other entities external that have similar type missions or will help them. But just kind of a couple of things that have come up out of some of this that I thought were pretty neat with the park was a couple of park superintendents ago, along with the gentleman that ran the Mojave Preserve, they're the ones that pushed very heavily for the active duty members to be able to go into the park without paying the fee. So I think that's one of the best partnerships we have. While we do have Marines out there using the trails and that sort of thing, it's also a great way for them to unwind and spend good quality family time up in the park doing something very wholesome. We don't need them running down 62, going down into Coachella Valley and all that. We'd like to keep them as local as we can. That just keeps them out of harm's way, and it just gets everybody back up here safely. We all know how dangerous 62 can be at times. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the night sky study. We partnered pretty heavily with the park a few years back when they were looking at some of their night sky study. I had many meetings with Karen where we sat down and we talked about it, and that kind of drove us to wanting to do one aboard the base. And that's data we plan on sharing with everybody. It's not going to be, behind 5 locked doors or something like that. It's data that we're going to get, that we're going to provide to the base, and that'll help everybody. And it kind of gives us what I like to call a baseline. It kind of shows us where we're at today and what we can do in the future to keep it from anything coming up here that's going to interfere with that. Because I think we all enjoy the night sky. I think we all enjoy going out there. And it's always kind of special when a family member comes in from back east or even down south, and you take them outside in the backyard, and you don't say anything. You just wait for them to sit down, they pop that beer, and they look up and they go, holy blank blank. What? Where do all those stars come from? They're always there. You just don't get to see them. We're special out here. We get to see them every night. Some of the other things that I think that David touched on is, as some of you know, we have helo routes that extend off the installation. We've been partners with the Mojave Desert Land Trust on some of the properties that are bordering the park because our helo routes go over those. The biggest one was Quail Mountain. Some of you might be familiar with the Quail Mountain project. That was something we partnered with that is going to directly help the park someday when it finally, at some point, that property will become part of the park itself. So a lot more people will get to enjoy it, and not just a few people that can afford 5-acre ranchettes all underneath the helicopter route. The other thing that we've been pretty good partners with the park with is invasive weeds. We've had a lot of groups of Marines go up there and work every year to help pull out some of the invasive weeds that are up in the park. The last 2 years we've had an Earth Day project, and it sounds kind of like a fun project, and it was. Personally, I wouldn't do it, but we have this park-to-park ride where we ride, there's a bicycle ride from 29 Palms up to Keys View. Now, if you went the other way, I'd be all for it. That wouldn't be too bad. But I don't know about anybody who wants. That's why you buy a car, David, okay? That's why you buy a car. You don't go ride 30 miles uphill and say what fun it was, because none of us in the audience that didn't do it don't believe you. So. But as far as partnerships go, again, it's easy to be partners with people at the park because they're very genuine, and when they tell you something, their word is their bond. And in this day and age, that means a lot. When you go over there and you talk with any of those folks, and they say, "Hey, we'll be there, we'll help you do that," you know they're going to show up, they're going to be on time, and they're going to be ready to go. And that speaks volumes for not only David's leadership, but some of the previous folks we've had here, and some of the folks that I'm always amazed how many of their staff members have been at this park for so many years, and I think we're pretty blessed with that too. And in closing, I would just like to say that our national park is special. I know I personally like riding my motorcycle up there, but I also love taking relatives and family members when they come out and take them up to the national park, because I've been through a lot of national parks, seen quite a bit of this big globe that we all live on. But the national park here is just very, very special. And I know my wife and I like to go up there and take pictures early in the morning. We'll go out and scope it out the night before. We'll do a leader's reconnaissance, figure out where to be, and then we'll be back up there first thing in the morning to take the photos. And that's just quality time with somebody I love that I couldn't replace anywhere else. So that to me is the best partnership I have with the park, is when I get to take my bride up there with me. Thanks.
It's great to work with Jim, and it's great to work with the Marines who can bike the 60 miles up to Keys View, because they were all about an hour in front of me going down the hill when I was still struggling to go up to Keys View. I like to bike at least once a year, and that's usually when I do it. Kevin, do you remember watching Lily Tomlin when she'd sit in that really big chair with her little feet, you know? You look like that right now. That is the biggest chair I've ever seen. That's outstanding. So our next guest this evening, Danielle, are you prepared to speak tonight?
I am. I'm okay.
Even with your injury and all?
I am. I'm
okay.
doing all right now.
Awesome
Observation is
arrival.
dangerous.
I'm really impressed. Nicely done. I'm delighted to introduce Danielle Segura, a good friend of mine. She's a Southern California native. She rode shotgun with her contractor father all around the Southland, and she was raised on the roads of the California desert. With degrees in art and 25 years of nonprofit management, she joined the Mojave Desert Land Trust in 2013. She loves bighorn sheep, and she really loves Joshua Tree coffee. MDLT just completed a project with Joshua Tree National Park and Outdoor Outreach, an organization that facilitates youth outdoor experiences. MDLT provides a guided native plant and seed exploration hike on their boundary property in Quail Wash, which I would encourage you all to explore. In addition, they have nursery activities that help to reinforce the skills they learn on that hike. It's a great partnership. Joshua Tree National Park would not exist today as it does without the help of MDLT and that partnership. They are responsible for many of the land purchases that have occurred in Death Valley and in Mojave and in Joshua Tree. When we have inholdings inside of a national park that have potentials for mining activity or development that's not compatible with a national park, it's really, really, really tough for the federal government to negotiate those types of things. That's what MDLT is really good at doing. So I am so thankful to have you as a partner, Danielle. Take it away.
Thank you. That was fun. Thanks, Dave, and your crowd. I was thinking about talking to Jim if I could maybe have a helicopter ride in, but I thought that might be pushing my luck a bit. Maybe next time. I'll work on that next time. So it's really an honor to be in this room and join this group. All of you are so savvy at conservation and love our public lands here. So I thought it might be nice just to kind of look at some maps. As David said, and as my fellow partners here at the table know, that we're often the map people in the room. And that's kind of what we do every day. So I wanted to sort of walk you through that and our process and how we approach our work. All right. So here we have California desert. And there's the outline of the California desert. So 25 million acres, right, of our state, which is a really important statistic at the Land Trust because that's a very powerful thing, 25% of our state. So, each morning, really, we approach our work this way. So we look at this map. The 3 largest national parks in the lower 48, and the best parks. Right? Yeah, the best parks. 3 new national monuments. Yeah. 72 BLM wilderness areas. National conservation lands. Military installations. All right, so I'm looking at this map every morning, and it's a beautiful thing. With an art background, this is the biggest collage I've ever approached in my life. And so our goal at the Land Trust, I'm just going to step away for a minute, is to make genetic connectivity from here to the tip of Death Valley. Is there a pointer?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Dave. My partner, Dave. This is a big task. So we have our headquarters in Joshua Tree, but we're really thinking about this large landscape level conservation all the time. And one of the things that David talked about was something that we do for our national park and BLM wilderness areas, and we buy something called inholdings. It's wonky and it doesn't sound that exciting to talk about, but it's really very important from a land management standpoint, for planning, for safety, for hazards. And so the Land Trust for 10 years has been working very hard with national parks to purchase inholdings inside the park boundary. We do that with private donations from foundations that are interested in conservation and from other donations from the public. I really love this map. This is a great map. Let's just go to Mojave Preserve just for a minute, and we'll be in Joshua Tree here in a couple of maps. But I wanted to show you the Mojave Preserve. This room is so well versed in public land in the desert. You remember that this became a national park unit in 1994, so there was quite a bit of private land within this unit, as we call it. So Land Trust does a lot of work in the Mojave Preserve, specifically in the Landfair Valley area. Right here. So all the red and blue that you see are the lands that we have purchased, acquired, and gotten back into park ownership. All right? Yeah. And let me give you some numbers, and then I want to share with you why I want to share these numbers with you. So we've conserved there 589 parcels, 22,597 acres, $9.5 million. All right? Let's look at that again. This area here primarily. And you'll see that the cross-hatching there, we've got the trails right under it. I share those numbers with you because I want you to keep that in mind as we think about that 25% of land in California and how important that is for recreation, for air corridors, for our air quality, water quality, and all the natural resources that just exist in the ground. Still a photograph of the Mojave Preserve. And so many of you have seen some of our before and after photos. If you've been a supporter, many of you are in the room. I wanted to share this one. I really was a little bit late because we were celebrating one of our staff members moving on, Brendan Hughes. He's been our land manager for 11 years. I don't think, it'd be hard pressed to think of anyone else who's walked as many miles as this gentleman has throughout the California desert. So I asked him to pick out his favorite cleanup photo. So this is in the Rock Springs area of Mojave Preserve. I want to make sure I get the acreage right here. And so we called this the Oliver property. And this is 40 acres. And so, you know, when David or Todd Cease, the superintendent, looks at these properties, what they know in this really important private-public partnership is that once we acquire this land, we will clean the land and we'll do as much restoration as we can before it gets back into park ownership, so that then the park begin to plan their management without this debris. So this is one element of our work. And one thing you may have noticed in our evolution is that when we were able to secure a new headquarters building in Joshua Tree, we were able to start bringing some of the salvage back and recycle that with donations from the community so that we could put that money right back into stewarding this land. All right, let's go to Joshua Tree and the in-holdings program in Joshua Tree. And let me give you some statistics there. All right. Let me go back. So, one more statistic about Mojave, which is important. So we protected 589 parcels. We still have some work to do. There's still 148 parcels remaining at 5,000 acres. All right, so we still have work to do. It's important. Let's go to Joshua Tree. All right. So remember, the blue and red have been purchased already. Most of it conveyed. Right? So 502 parcels, 20,120 acres of in-holdings in Joshua Tree National Park saved. $8.4 million. Okay, we're not done. 300 parcels remain, 9,500 acres. All right, so still work to be done there. But again, what we're thinking about here when we're looking at this unit and when we look at this every morning on our maps, not only the private in-holdings, but as Jim was referring to now, and specifically in Joshua Tree, are buffer lands around the park and that connectivity. And that's when our partnership with the base comes in and we're able to buy those linkage lands as well. What an amazing partnership. I mean, that was such a spectacular thing for me to learn about when I started the Land Trust in 2013, that we would have this incredible partnership with the Department of Defense. It's been something that is very meaningful for both of our organizations, and we've been able to talk about land management with the base, get their input, and align, again, several federal agencies with a nonprofit organization, on the ground local organization. So this property, again, I asked Brendan to pick out a favorite in holding. Do you know what this property is? It's a test. No? Know where it is?
It's not the Armenian monument, is it?
It's not. This is the Harris property, South Canyon Lands, and this guzzler was put on the property by the Society for Bighorn Sheep. So we have the guzzler now. I'm kind of excited about that because I love bighorn sheep. So we'll be working to get this land back into the park, which is part of our process. And so just something about land trusts in general. You know, land trusts have been around for a very long time and have many iterations, actually internationally. Many of them started in the East Coast buying what we call conservation easements on farmland, ranch land. In the West, land trusts have a different identity, often buying larger pieces of fee land, what we call buying land outright, with the intent of getting that back into protection. Some land trusts have a preserve model in which they hold land, like the Wildlands Conservancy. We don't have that model at the land trust. We still have so many inholdings and work to do and are able to buy fee land throughout the desert that will continue in that model for quite a while. When I show you the linkage map here in a few minutes, you'll see some of those properties that we are hanging on to in perpetuity. And while those are private because we own them as a nonprofit, we do have passive public use on that. Again, I don't anticipate that we'll become a preserve, but we still encourage folks to recreate on the lands that we do hold. I think the next slide is my announcement. I'm going to make an announcement. I think you might know. So this is the first announcement. You're the first group of folks to share. We are any day away from closing a property that is, I think, if I can leave you with one thing about inholdings, again, it's kind of wonky to talk about an inholding, but a lot of folks ask me, that land's protected already. It's inside a unit that has 790,000 acres. Why do you need to do that? Well, again, think about access, uses that might not be compatible for the park and what kind of challenges there might be. Or maybe a property, God, I hope this is the right slide. Or maybe a property like this. So we are a couple of days away from closing on Samuelson's Rock. Yay is right, because as you know, the folks that are visiting the park, you know, especially our millennials on Instagram, know all about this place, right? So they have no idea that they're trespassing. They have no idea, you know, what the interpretation is, how they should recreate there. And what ends up happening is that's a risk for the park. And so if something happens to someone there, you're still going to have to take care of those issues on the park. Might have to call in partners to help that. So it's really critical that parcels like this are protected and back into park ownership. So this particular parcel, long history, you all know Samuelson's Rock, but from our standpoint on the land side, what we do is we contact landowners through mail, just regular standard human contact, and we keep doing that until we start a dialogue with them, and we buy our property at fair market value. And this was a 10-year effort. Like Quail Wash, this property was on our list, our original list in 2005 and 6 when the land trust started, and we had no contact with the folks. And then just all of a sudden, which sometimes happens in the desert, we get a call from a family member. Someone's passed away. It goes into a trust, or the family, nieces, nephews who don't know anything about Joshua Tree, want to get rid of this property in the middle of the desert, begins to start negotiations with us. And that's what happened with this property. So we're really excited. The staff is very excited about this long-term project. This is Yanni, one of our land stewards, out doing some site inspections on the property recently. Just a view from that area. And so Jim mentioned our work and how we have this incredible alignment between the park and the base and these helicopter corridors. And Jim, feel free to jump in if we want to add anything here. But I just wanted to show you a little bit about our local work here in the basin. And in the last 18 months, we really have even bought more land, an additional 2,000 acres in the basin, and are committed to that. I think a lot of you have also been involved in our Highway 62 campaign, which is, again, targeting those properties that not only are in a wildlife linkage corridor, but also in some of those flight corridors. And that's delineated on the map here. So all the blue and green property you see are properties we own now. What's really exciting to me, again, in the short time I've been at the Land Trust and with our work and partners at the base, is what you can see is we're really making a difference in this corridor here. And we are also looking at a property in this area. This is North Joshua Tree. And what's exciting to me about this and for our community, for the park, for us and the base, is that what I can see here is that I can see a future where we have a wildlife linkage trail, and we have a path, and we have a culvert or something under Highway 62 that leads us out to that base line. So, you know, the work is very real and tangible, and those are some things that the public can experience all the time. And something incredible that's happened as well in North Joshua Tree, this is our Coyote Valley property, is this entire neighborhood. I don't know if anyone is in the audience lives in Coyote Valley or up in North Joshua Tree, but that neighborhood on their own have organized around that property. And they approached us about forming a community neighborhood initiative, but with stewardship and conservation in mind. So your neighborhood watch basically for conservation. That they were all interested in using the same stewardship practices that we were using on Coyote Valley. We're 2 years into the project. They all work together. They have hikes. Our land monitors go out, talk to them about stewardship and restoration efforts. We host lectures, things on native plants, anything that the community is interested in. And then most of them are setting aside parts of their 5-acre parcels, that's a very parcelized area, as we call it, to add to conservation. Why am I excited about that? Because they're already conserving that land around our piece of land, right? So we don't have to do that because people are conserving their land. So all those little dots in there, I know, have already land set aside for that genetic diversity, and we don't have to do that. The folks at the base recently collaborated with us and hosted that neighborhood group out on base, and it's another partnership with the community so that those neighbors would know what the base is up to and see the tortoise work that the base is doing so that they can also be another partner with them. So I'm really particularly proud of that effort. And then this blue dot here is one of our most recent acquisitions, a long one. This is, recently I've been saying, oh, conservation's a marathon, not a sprint, but I think it's a sprint and a marathon. So in 2011, my predecessor, Nancy Carl, and Jim and his team started working on this property here, and that's on the western edge of Joshua Tree National Park. And that will really help David and his folks at some point have another access point to the park. And again, it will be at some point in park ownership. Just a few views from Quail Mountain and Quail Wash that Jim mentioned, other properties that we've conserved in that linkage. And this was just this last Earth Day. Every Earth Day we do collaborate with the base and the Morongo Basin Transit Authority, who bring out between 60 and 90 active duty Marines to one of our co-conserved properties, and they do a big cleanup. You know, as much reach as we have in that big map, we're still a small organization. We rely on a lot of volunteers. Some of you are sitting here in the room. Thank you very, very much. So this annual Earth Day really helps us. We've got these young folks out there who are cleaning and restoring. And so this was an exciting day because we took them to Long Canyon Peak. That's that new property. And we're able to do restoration work there. And we're always very grateful to the base for their support there. And if any of you are familiar with Long Canyon Peak, another exciting project that we're thinking about with partners like the park and folks in Desert Hot Springs and in the Coachella Valley is that property will help connect a hiking trail, Long Canyon Peak, so we could see real connectivity from Yucca Valley to Desert Hot Springs. That's just incredible to me to think about that kind of opportunity for the community, both in the upper and lower desert. That's my last slide. I just wanted to say something about partnership. It's, the Land Trust really, we do most of our work behind the scenes. And when you see that map that I showed originally, we have this ability to be kind of a web and a connector of what a lot of folks here in the room who are at conservation organization and other organizations, and certainly the folks here today, to bring together. And land trusts really are community organizations. It's your land trust. It's a community's land trust. We're working and soliciting funds from all of you and the community to secure our public lands. And I think there's such an incredible value in that we all share no matter where we're from, that we experience this land in the same way, dark night skies, long hikes, equestrian opportunities. And so the Land Trust has this ability to be very flexible and nimble and work with a large department like the Department of Defense. And we can work with Department of the Interior with BLM and Park Service, California Fish and Wildlife, and then a whole slew of other kinds of organizations in the community. It's a really exciting place, and we really depend on those partnerships and value them. And something recently that's happened is with the visitation and David's call to all of us to take that seriously when the park has so many folks coming out, is that we have put together this adventure kit. Many of you have seen it, but we've been able to say, hey, one of the days you're recreating here, why don't you head out to Amboy Crater? There's a lot of public land here to experience. You're in Joshua Tree one day, take a trip north. And that's just another dialogue. When you have a good, strong partnership that's open and everybody can give something, that's kind of what we've been able to develop here in the basin. And I think it's really quite remarkable. And I know that from the Land Trust perspective, we're really proud to be a part of that. So thank you.
The man with the camera is going to yell at me if I don't turn on all the lights. Okay, Danielle, there was a 5-minute limit for each of the speeches. Had you come to the pre-meeting, you would have known
I'm sorry
that, but
about
it's
that.
all right. So Meg, as a result,
in a
all of
crisis.
it's all right.
I was
Meg,
in a
as a
crisis.
result, all of your time has been cut.
I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
So Kevin, the way we do this is, don't we have people write questions?
The room's small enough to.
You're comfortable with that? Excellent. I like that too. So the Long Canyon project that she's talking about, really, really neat. The Conservancy down in the Coachella Valley, the Coachella Valley Mountain Conservancy, they are really keen on building a trailhead down in Desert Hot Springs, hooking up with Yucca Valley. Amazing opportunity. I would love that, because what's driving me crazy right now are people are taking their motorcycles up that particular chunk of wilderness and riding into the park. And if we have a steady flow of hikers that are in those areas, that are watching those areas, they are the eyes and ears of the National Park Service. Something else I wanted to mention as well, Secretary Salazar was really pushing for this idea of America's Great Outdoors. And when I worked in DC, people made fun of it, but it really is county parks, land trusts, land at Copper Mountain College, land on the military base, BLM, Forest Service, Park Service. These are all our great outdoors. Not all of us can live in Joshua Tree. Some of us live in LA, and the LA River Corridor becomes part of our great outdoors that links us up with Santa Monica Mountains, which links us to California State Parks. So we're all part of the same mission, which is great. Okay, I love being moderator because I can just talk all the time. So last but certainly not least, a woman who loves to be hugged, who is full of love and joy all the time. She's a fountain of joy, and she'll be spewing forth tonight. Meg Foley is another good friend and a great partner as the executive director of Joshua Tree National Park Association. Meg's lived in the Morongo Valley since 1984. You're not that old. She currently serves as the executive director of JTMPA. Previously, she served on the Morongo Valley Community Services District for 6 years. She worked as town manager. She worked with the fire department. She started the paramedic program there, secured over $200,000 in money for park improvements, including playgrounds and the skate park and bathroom installations. Meg, I think your legacy to all of us will be bathroom installations throughout the Morongo Basin. Other community involvement for Meg include the Morongo Basin Conservation Association, Friends of Big Morongo Canyon Preserve, Morongo Valley Chamber of Commerce, Basin Energy Assessment Team, and Morongo Valley's Christmas Cheer for Kids program. Her other past involvements include the Morongo Valley Fire Safe Council, the Morongo Valley Fire Explorers, and the California Desert Coalition. As executive director of JTNPA, Meg has helped manage what was once a really struggling park association. I don't know if you remember JTNPA from 6 or 7 years ago, but it was a tough time in the middle of a recession. Really we're worried about going into the red, potentially going bankrupt. Today it is a incredibly healthy association that pumps every year, I would say hundreds of thousands of dollars back into the park through direct aid donations that help us purchase things in the park that we need to do, but also through the labor of the men and women that work at all the visitor centers. This year I'm especially proud Meg became an advocate when I came to her and said, Meg, I need help. We don't have enough bodies. I need bodies, Meg. And she said, you know what, we'll hire 3 new sales clerks. You can free up the rangers that are at the desks. You can stick them out in the field. They can hang out at trailheads. They can hang out at the entrance stations. So, Meg, it is a delight to welcome you as a partner tonight. Welcome.
I was told this afternoon that I am more huggable than David. We were standing side by side, so that was why he had to make a few remarks about me being huggable. I guess let's see, just the top one to click? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Last month, Ruth Riemann ended her presentation on effective grassroots activism with a slide that I just loved, and it really talks about the we and the roots of activism in the basin and how we all spring from them. And so even though tonight I'm going to talk about our business organization, this sentiment you will see runs through all of our operations. It's just community and we and partners. So here's our mission statement. We were formed in 1962. We're a nonprofit partner of the park. My neck isn't as flexible as Dave and Danielle's, where I'm going to keep unching. We're defined by the Park Service as a cooperating association. Cooperating associations were formed to really help with education and interpretation. A lot of people have kind of a misconception that cooperating associations are friends groups, and the Park Service defines them a little bit differently. So friends groups exist solely to provide funds for a park unit. Cooperating associations' main mission is to assist with interpretive activities and education, although we're certainly not precluded from raising funds, and as you'll see, we do quite a bit of that. So like any business, we're guarded by articles of incorporation, bylaws, policies, state and federal laws. But then since we're a park partner, we get to be involved with some extra layers of fun. And we also have our roles defined by director's orders. Do you know how many director's orders there are?
There's over 100 right now.
Yeah. So luckily, we only have 3, and DO 32 dictates our activities as a cooperating association, 21 on donations and fundraising, and DO 6 for interpretation and education. DO 21 was just rewritten. It took about 3 years and was released at the end of December. All of these actually, they're kind of ambiguous when you really look at the agreements, and the specific regulations are defined in reference manuals. So some of the DOs can be dozens of pages long, and the reference manuals much longer than dozens. So the next couple years, when the reference manual comes out for DO 21, we'll find out really what the impacts of those changes are. So in addition to director's orders, we also have these agreements with the park. The Concessionaire Agreement is necessary just because we sell water and chapstick. I'm not kidding. The cooperative agreement defines our roles in operating the Desert Institute, and it also allows us to accept monies from the park to manage specific projects. So those are managed under task agreements. So for example, the remodel in the Joshua Tree Visitor Center, we assumed the task agreement for that and oversaw that project. And I know when David asked me to do that and says, all you have to do is write a check, it's time to run. So we also operate under supplemental agreements. We do pass sales at all of the visitor centers. We only make a couple bucks a pass on those, but we really do it as a visitor service due to the increased visitation David referred to. And then the park leases the exhibit area from us in Joshua Tree Visitor Center, and then we operate under a scope of sales. So all the items in the gift shops or the bookstores, we can't just carry anything. So it has to be justified, so to speak, as an education item, interpretive item, or safety. So the scope of sales defines all of those items. So like I said, even though we're not an official Friends group right now, we do quite a bit of fundraising, and we hold the Legacy Fund for the park. This is funded by pottery sales and general donations. Last week it was about $100,000. I think you wrote some big checks, so it might be down a little from that. But the park's also greatly constrained on sometimes what they can buy. They can't buy cakes for events, so, and David likes cakes, so we can help out from there. Everyone likes cakes. Well, speaking of hugs, one of the other ways that we fund the Legacy Fund is we've had recently quite a few companies that dedicate a portion of their proceeds to the park. So the Parks Preserve, the logo on the upper left-hand corner, it's a brand new company. These guys have decided to give 50% of their proceeds to parklands. They're local. Yeah. And they're based in Yucaipa, so we're their home park. So they literally drove out today to deliver their first gifts, so that was a lot of fun. Local ones, Joshua Tree Candle Company, Sendero, and Parks Projects. And it's never part of the agreements to accept funds from any of these companies. We don't necessarily carry their products, so they just really do it because they've got a great company value. We also hold restricted funds for the park. Right now they total almost $300,000, and there's some of the items that are held in there. Marion Tremblay is our office manager, so she keeps track of the 34 separate accounts and restricted, the Legacy Fund, our operations budget, which we'll get to in a minute, and all of the scheduling in the visitor center. So if she gets a little testy sometimes when you come in the office, now you know why. She's got quite a workload. So David mentioned aid to the park, and there's a couple ways that we can give aid, cash aid, and then in kind. So these are some of the things that we built into this year's budget, the interns, tortoise monitors, and then there's usually some unexpected expenses that come up. Also, like last month, the board approved buying $10,000 worth of junior ranger badges because the park went through the entire supply for the year in half of the year just because of the increased visitation. So these items up here don't include those. We also bought a laptop to help with collect dark sky data. Let's see, I think that's about it. Speaking of dark sky, you see Tom here, Lorraine, those guys have been incredible volunteers in helping with that effort to get the park designated as, or try to get it designated as an official dark sky park. So here's a little table with a snapshot of our aid to the park. Like David said, we've experienced the same jump in business that the park has in visitation. So fiscal year end, our fiscal year runs from, like the parks, from October to the end of September. The end of fiscal year 2015 was the first time that we crested 2 million. That's a little bit skewed because the past sales are in there, so you can't take approximately 50% and figure that's our profits because of the past sales. We just got the numbers for the end of April. We're at over 2 million for this fiscal year with 5 months to go. So it's quite a leap. And so in the total aid to the park in the far right, that's made up of the cash, the information specialist salaries, and like the mortgage. I didn't mention that, but we purchased the visitor center in Joshua Tree in 2005 at a cost of $1 million. So we still have quite a significant mortgage on that, and that mortgage guides a lot of our business considerations. Actually, I think it was 07, 08, and 09 we actually finished in the red. So that isn't reflected. Our aid to the park continued very strong, but we really were struggling and almost insolvent. So it's nice to be on steadier ground now. So I'm a member, the whole organization is, of the Public Lands Alliance, and that's comprised of partner agencies for public lands. And they have a pretty active listserv, and a couple years ago they did a little survey asking for comparison of aid given to the park versus your gross sales revenue. So you can see we gave 42% of our percentage of sales, which is pretty hefty. And it's not complete. Thank you. You know, it's not a big sample here, but it has a variety of other public land partners, so not too shabby. So as I mentioned, we've purchased the visitor center. That's probably our most visible activity. We struggle just like the park in trying to keep up with the crunch of visitation. Our septic bill has increased incredibly the last couple years. We've also had to put porta potties in the parking lot, just trying to keep up with the volume of visitors. We're in the process of, or will be in the summer, of adding more restrooms to Joshua Tree Visitor Center. So I'll take a little peek at what the impact is on trying to keep the stores stocked. So some behind the scenes. So this is our office. All of our offices are in the Oasis Visitor Center. This is Cindy Carrington and Cindy Cunningham, our buyer, and Cindy helps stock. So it looks like a mess, but this is our really only storeroom. So all the product comes into this small room. There's the other end of the room, so that's it. And those boxes are unpacked, bagged, tagged, repacked, folded to fit on shelves to make the best use of the square footage they have. And it's just incredible, the volume of product that they are able to flip in that little room. And that's my office door back in the upper right-hand corner, so all of our offices are here too. There's Kevin's with the window. Cindy's taking over the whole office. This bag wall just appeared one morning a couple months ago. We're locking our offices at night. We're afraid we're going to have storage in there too. When you consider most of our per cap spending is $3 a head in the visitor center. So when you look at just imagine the numbers it takes to make up $2.5 million in revenues. It's pretty staggering. It's a lot of magnets, a lot of books, postcards, and bags. So this is Jamie. She is our Joshua Tree Visitor Center manager. She would kill me for using this picture. But this is taken between Christmas and New Year's, and we all look like this. We were going to take a poll to see who had the biggest bags. She's been here for over 10 years, and Joshua Tree Visitor Center is the busiest visitor center by far, and she just is incredible worker. So that's a part of one load that is behind her right there. If you look closely, you see Kevin up there in the right hand in the bag. So all of this is one load for a couple days going to Joshua Tree Visitor Center. And Jamie uses her own vehicle to do that. It's a Volkswagen that we swear expands, but all of those fit in there. It's another one. And there, it fit. Here's another load a couple days ago, or a couple days later. And then this one is going to Cottonwood. So we don't have our own vehicle. I'm hoping to buy a van in the next couple months, but the park loans us their vehicles once in a while. So the Cindy's ran it down to Cottonwood and came back up. I should mention too, Cottonwood's completely off the grid, so we have to process all the credit cards down there on a slider and then hand run them. So that during the height of the season this year was taking a full day and a half to do that. Impossible carpal tunnel syndrome. But luckily now there's new technology, and as of 3 weeks ago we're able to use them electronically, and that saves a lot of time. Some more. One of the things I'm most proud of in working with the team that we work with, we've made a real concerted effort the last 2.5, 3 years to pull as much of our business into the local community as we can. So a lot of the vendors are members of the Public Land Alliance. They have get the whole scope of sales thing, and parks tend to do business with those vendors. Like I said, we made a real concerted effort to do as much business as possible locally. We did a rough count from last year and part of this year, and we spent over $400,000 with local businesses. 300 of that was the septic tank, but no, I'm only kidding. We did boost that, though. It was almost 40 with septic pumping, plumbing, and porta potty rentals. We spent over 22 with construction contractors, and when we manage the exhibition remodel, if we're managing the monies, we can work with local contractors where it's more difficult for the park to be able to do that. We spent over $98,000 with local artists, over 26 with local authors, and almost $220,000 for other products and services. So we've really tried to be part of the community because we wouldn't be here without the community's help. And this is one of our staff members, Dave Larsen. The folks that we have in the visitor centers aren't just retail clerks. They work hand in glove with the Park Service to really impart information, to be interpretive aids. One of the park contractors who's traveled around to many of the parks said last summer that he never saw association personnel work at the level and deliver the quality of service that he did for, with our aides. So that was a real compliment coming from him. A couple of the Park Service folks nominated Dave Larsen to receive the Service Award last July 4th. I'm still not sure associations were eligible for it, but he got it, and we sent him to Washington, so that was super. So we also do publications. I'm looking at Donna Thompson. Almost all of these publications were done by volunteers. So our newest one is this one. It's at the printer right now, Reptiles and Amphibians of Joshua Tree. Donna did 90% of the work on this volume. Joe Zarkey said you did, so it's true. And she also was assisted by Joe Zarkey and Cam Barrows, so that should be on the shelves in a couple weeks, but it was an incredible labor of love. The same with the Birds of Joshua Tree. Bill Truesdell and Joe Zarkey did that. Both of these brochures had every single photo contributed free of charge. So real team efforts here. Bill also did the bird checklist and the wildflower brochure, and we had to completely reproduce the Joshua Tree Desert Reflections because the printing technology was no longer available, and Bill was invaluable proofing that. So all volunteer help here. Wonderful job. And this, you may recognize Chris Franger, owner of Coyote Corner, heard a lot of the issues that Joshua Tree was experiencing due to the increased visitation. So issues in the park, issues caused by Airbnb guests not knowing where they belonged or where they were, pedestrian deaths from people walking across the highway. So she took upon herself to develop this poster and postcards, and there's a couple over here on the table. And so the market that she intended to market these to is local businesses, Airbnb users, and then the postcards in restaurants, so in little stand-up stanchions. So she did the first run of, I think, 100, and they flew off the shelves. And so then, since it was so park-specific, we underwrote a second run. So if anyone would like these, they're at the Coyote Corner and free of charge. And then a couple of the other activities we do, we work with the park on the Robert Lee Graduate Student Research Program. And the Robert Lee family gives $10,000 a year, and then we contribute a couple more thousand to that, and offer an average of 4 students, and they get 2 years to complete their project. And that's all park-centric research. And then we had the art festival. I'm looking at Steve and Ruth. I think you guys were involved in the founding of this, weren't you? In the early years? So, a little bit. So I think it's the longest running art event in the basin, 25 years. And here's a couple of pictures. There's Ralph Nordstrom in the upper left-hand corner, and you'll see a nice compliment about him. Thomas and Amara, David McChesney. And then we also honor achievements that have helped preserve or protect the Southern California deserts by offering the Minerva Hoyt Conservation Award And when you look at the winners, it's really like a who's who of conservation leaders. And then in addition to these folks that are pictured, we also had the Owens Valley Committee and John Walmuth with CVAG. And there's Steve and Ruth. The year that they received it, we also partnered with the park to dedicate Mount Minerva in the park. Dee and Betty Zeller. There's David and Terry Weiner with Desert Protective Council. Danielle mentioned Nancy Carl in the lower right-hand corner. And then this is this year's winner, Cindy Zacks, who's in the dress in the middle. And if you look at the students surrounding her, they're both present students and some of her alumni, and they're really some of our conservation leaders that have made a great impact today. I see Fraser and Jamie Haney, April Saul, Sierra Zacks, Jack Thompson, Carrie Puckett with Wildlands. So they really were lucky that they all decided to stay home and put their experience to work to benefit our area. And there's the past winners together. And then we've also provided administrative support and cash aid for the Artist in Residence program. So Joshua Tree is one of the longest running Artist in Residence program in the Park Service, 15 years. So unfortunately, this was the last year that we're offering it in its current form. The Park Service is under a freeze the footprint mandate and really can't expand the buildings much. So the cabin is being looked at for staffing housing, for law enforcement housing. So it'll take a different shape next year. And then one of our primary programs, the Desert Institute. And Kevin does a phenomenal job managing this. And here's some of the offerings. And in addition to doing the curriculum and lining up instructors and volunteers and training and all the scheduling, Kevin also does almost all the marketing for the Joshua Tree National Park Association. He lays out the newsletter, does Facebook, and as you saw, helps pack product in the expandable Volkswagen, but just does a great job. This is one of the fastest expanding aspects of the Desert Institute, our special programs, and some of our board members are great at hopping in to help with the custom programs. So Mark Wheeler, Daryl Shade, Kevin Powell, all help with that. Kevin also does the lecture series. I think Osher was one we did last year. He worked with the Ace Hotel in Palm Springs to offer a summer lecture series that featured Ruth Nolan, Chris Clark, and Kim Stringfellow. And then here's some of the demographics of the Desert Institute. And the volunteer hours. So the Desert Institute volunteers often work like a whole weekend, Friday night, Saturday and Sunday. They're the face of the park and the association. They're out there on hikes 8 and 10 hours a day. So they have a high level of training and are just incredible. And I look and I see Stan and Becky Dressler. These guys are unbelievable. I know they're filling in also as camp host in Black Rock. Last Christmas, they arrived with a trailer full of Christmas cookies and drove to every visitor center and delivered cookies. They're unreal. And the instructors, too, they're almost volunteers for what we pay them, $1,500 for weekends work, and many of them donate their fees back. And then I'll just leave that up there for a moment. This gentleman traveled 4,000 miles to take a Desert Institute class, and this is a kind of a thank you note, a love letter on saying, you know, how happy he was to have that experience. And just in closing, I want to thank David, even though you made the hug comment. David's very inclusive with the association. attend weekly management meetings. I appreciate that we're able to work so well and so closely together. And I'm just really impressed with my colleagues. I think of us as kind of a small organization kind of doing big things thanks to some really long-serving staff and board members and volunteers. And we couldn't do it without the interaction that we have with other local organizations, businesses, and community members. So thank you all. I looked friendlier, didn't I?
Well, because Meg took so much time, we have 1 minute for questions right now. So we'll do 12 5-second questions. Thank you guys so much. Joshua Tree would not exist as a national park if not for the four of you sitting over there right now. We just could not do it. And I am overwhelmed with love when I see all the volunteers back there. I see our JOSAR team. I see Desert Institute. I see our Black Ground hosts. I see retirees who are coming back that just cannot stop. Even, oh my gosh, you guys are constantly picking up garbage off the side of the road. I just love it. So I'd like to open it up to questions you might have right now. We've got some really smart people up here. Yes, young man over there with the healthy head of hair. Yes, please, go ahead.
How many acres was the Samuelson land acquisition? How many acres?
Let's see how many acres that is. I think it's 60, but I have it, 60.
Thank you.
Could you do that in hectares?
No, I'm doing hectares
Okay.
right now.
I just happened to notice we have a guest appearance in the back row this evening. Jane Rogers, our new Chief of Science and Resource Stewardship. Jane, could you stand up? Come on, Jane, come on. So, if you haven't met Jane, she came on board about 4 or 5 months ago. She's outstanding. She my gosh, she's taking us light years ahead as far as planning. Her mind is going to go to a museum someday because it's really outstanding the way it works. We're delighted to have her in the park, so thank you for that nice warm welcome. Okay, any other questions right now? Because I've got one for you. So each of you gets one go at this. What about the federal government most annoys you? So you've got to work with us, and we make it so darn hard to do just about everything. I would like to know if you could name the one thing that makes you, want to punch me. Okay.
Use the microphones.
No, I'm not going on record.
I think Meg would be more than happy to start the discussion.
I've never wanted to punch you. But no, the system is very cumbersome. The system that the Park Service has to operate under and that we have to operate under to do business with them is just not as, it's a little bit of a cultural change from the private sector and a little bit cumbersome. So I feel sorry for you guys.
I think I would kind of echo that sentiment. I'm sure there's a reason, just like they say, every safety rule was written because of somebody's mishap. I'm sure a lot of the acquisition rules that we have within the federal government are because somebody probably squandered taxpayer dollars. I'm sure that's what it was. But it is very, very cumbersome and almost to the point where you spend more resources than what you actually let a contract out for. So that would be my biggest aggravation. It's just the lines of acquisition need to change within the federal government. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of our contracts should be right back here in the local area. And we did have a congressman that was supporting that a while back, and that's something that ever comes back with some of the citizens you ought to look at is that so much of federal contracts let in the local area should go to local local businesses, I should say.
So when we put things out to bid, for a construction project, we often get a company from Florida that will be the lowest bidder, which boggles my mind. But because of the system, that's a really interesting point.
So I would just echo that as well, just that some of not having flexibility is challenging and having that local input. And I'm looking at Aaron Adams in the audience, and I'm just going to say the biggest challenge are review appraisers.
Well, it's a fundraising organization. Our frustration has been how to give you money. There are so many obstacles to being able to get donations for the park. The JOSAR members cannot solicit for donations because of all these restrictions. Hopefully, Order 21 will go to change some of that. But we would have a lot easier time if we could, if JOSAR had more access to actually going out there and getting donations.
So the rule is, JOSAR, they're basically employees of the National Park Service, because we're able to cover them with liability insurance that way. And as such, I can't ask for anything from the public. So our partner organizations, our nonprofit organizations like MDLT and to a certain extent MEG, they're the ones who can make the asks where we actually can't make the asks. So that's a really good point. Okay, any other young lady there? Yes. Yeah. You can ask for donations, yes, so you're good. You just get out there and you ask for donations, that would be fine. So long as you're not doing it in your capacity as a Park Service employee. Excellent. That's great. And I don't know if you all know Lori or not, but she's been working really hard on the residential learning center concept for Joshua Tree, another partner, looking at bringing kids in for overnight. And we've been looking at a property inside the park for development right now. So she's part of that team that's working on that. So another important partner. Yes, thank you, Lori. Okay, any other questions out there? You're all looking really tired right now. We should have done exercise in the middle of that. Next time, write that down, Kevin. Next time after the second speaker, we do exercises, okay? Oh, just eliminate that. Yes, sir. That would be you. You with the silver hair there, protecting the bobcats. Yes, you.
I'm curious, given the National Monument situation, all of the new administration rules coming from the president and stuff, how do you see your roles as being able to be active in trying to defend our national monuments?
Well, as a DOD and a federal employee, I would not be able to be out there with a picket sign or anything like that. But what I would say is the National Monument, the National Trails Monument, is very protective of the mission of the installation. It does very much help us ward off any type of alternative energy projects out there on our northern or eastern border that would be impacting to our mission.
So I would just take a step back and say, I think the land trust perspective is with the investments that we have, both financially and from the commitment of the donors and the community, we always have an obligation, regardless of what administrations or what comes through the desert, in terms of renewables or anything, just to be involved and active in that from a policy standpoint, and making sure that you all as community members have the facts and information about your public lands and how you recreate in them and how you want to advocate for them. So I think it's up to us to make sure we get you that information so that you can be involved in decisions in your public land. And so as a nonprofit, and what we do in the desert, we're definitely involved in just making sure folks are aware of those monuments and parks or any other lands that have a certain value that help with that genetic connectivity.
So Jim and I we work for you, the people of the United States, and we work for the president and for Congress. So, what they say is kind of the rule for us, but we are both dependent on science. And, our decisions are based on science. So what we get from our staff helps us base what our decision-making process is on. So we know that we do need genetic connectivity. We firmly know that. We've seen where it's failed before, and we'll be advocates for that because science is our foundation. Yes?
I've noticed that there's been some trail maintenance going on over the past month or two, using mules even. which is kind of exciting, equestrian. And I was wondering if the Marines are involved in that at all, doing the trail maintenance projects?
We probably have some volunteers, but we're not doing anything from an organizational level.
So I can address the mule issue. The mules come from Sequoia Kings Canyon. We are experimenting with mules right now, and those mules we're using them for staging for the Youth Conservation Corps this summer. So we find it more efficient to have the kids dig trail and create trail than to carry timber and rocks. So the mules were brought in to do that. It worked out really successfully. So the management team is looking for other things next spring where we can take the mules out of the snow and use them again.
I know they were working on some steps on the California Riding and Hiking. Do you have a list of projects, or are you open to suggestions?
Oh man, our workload for trails is pretty extensive. The backlog maintenance log right now for trails is $1.6 million. We've got 4 guys on trail crew. And then whoever we get during the summer for the Youth Conservation Corps. So I'd love to add trail projects to our list. You know, that's actually a really good volunteer opportunity. We're working with a group, and I'm sorry, I'm talking now. It's your job to talk. But another partner organization we work with is called Field, and it primarily works with youth between 16 and 22, FIELD, that are from migrant families, and the kids did not get a high school education. So they've just opened a new corps down in Mecca. So we've recruited kids from that area, both from the reservation, the Torres Martinez Reservation, and also from the greater Indio area. And they're working on a boundary demarcation program right now. So these young people are coming up into the park to work on ATV fences and trail, to defend those portions of the park. So, well, they're kind of volunteers. They're YCC. They're earning some money. They're earning a stipend, and they're getting high school credit so they can get their GED. So it's kind of volunteer, but it's also a little bit of money. Okay, I see John Loretic is falling asleep back there, so it might be time to call this quits. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for caring about your national parks. Thank you, partners, for all that you're doing. And Danielle, thank you for showing up. You know.
Listen, I was just trying to, I don't know if you remember, but you came to our spring open house in that really cool GTO. So I was just trying to outdo you.
Yes. I think that was way cooler than the GTO. So, thank you all very much and have a great night.